Everyone, how's it going? Welcome back to another video. So this is my Dead City episode 1 explained video. I'm going to be doing these every single week. So for Thursdays, I will post my general review, sort of reaction to the episode, talk about the big moments, my first thoughts, and sort of, just a general review. The following Sunday, when the episode does release on cable, I guess to sort of celebrate the cable release, because weirdly, it does feel like that's still the more official release. I'm going to release this sort of explained video, breaking down every single moment from the episode, talk about all the Easter eggs, all of the references and everything, and sort of explain everything in the best way that I can anyways. And so, yeah, obviously this is for episode 1. So first of all, please be aware that this will contain spoilers for the episode, but I imagine most of you guys have already watched this episode. And also, if you want more Walking Dead content like this, then maybe consider subscribing. Now, with The Walking Dead Dead City, The Walking Dead is sort of officially in a phase 2. I've seen some people argue that it is a phase 3, but I don't know, I wouldn't necessarily say that it was a phase 3. Phase 2, you could argue maybe started with Angela Kang taking over and then some of the other spin-offs, but that didn't necessarily feel like a phase 2. I still think that kind of felt more like a phase 1. This new phase right now that we're in, this new era of The Walking Dead, this feels very significant. This feels very different, and I would label this being phase 2 if anything. And we can see the big changes here with this show. First of all, the show has a budget that is reportedly near 12 million, and before it was like 3-4 million or something per episode. So like a crazy increase in the budget. And obviously I don't know those numbers for sure. That's just sort of what's reported out there, but you can tell with watching the show, the budget is insane. Like you notice it immediately. The opening shot to this episode, we do see Maggie watching Manhattan from afar. She sees hundreds of walkers roaming the streets of Manhattan, and this shot to me is just sort of iconic because we immediately just see the cinematography. We see the budget of this show. Like it's movie quality. It immediately stands out. It looks absolutely incredible. Maggie's hair also looks very similar to her comic hair, which is kind of cool. It's a little bit shorter. In the comic, her hair is usually a little bit shorter. So yeah, sort of an Easter egg to her overall comic look. The walker she encounters in this scene actually, to me anyways, looks a lot like the Well Walker. Not entirely. Obviously, first of all, it's not the same walker. I'm not saying that. For those that don't remember, there was a Well Walker in season 2 that Glenn fought on Maggie's farm, and yeah, I don't know, this walker just sort of gave me similar vibes. Maggie is super stressed because obviously she's sort of dealing with the loss of Herschel. Well, I mean, he was taken by the Croat, and just the stresses of her life. It's just bad things seem to always happen, and there's always seemingly a connection to Negan and the Saviors. Like, that man is still haunting her to this day. The intro to me is so amazing. First of all, it opens up with a zombie eye, which is similar to previous Walking Dead intros. We see chaos in New York City, as Marshall Armstrong later describes it in the episode, as the US government destroyed major cities to prevent the zombie virus spreading. And it's kind of insane to think that this is what the world looked like, or this is what the city looked like when Rick was in that hospital. I mean, no wonder Shane and Lori thought Rick died, because this is insane. We do see that the army was involved in New York City, much like it was in Atlanta. We see a helicopter and a tank. First of all, the helicopter is not a reference to the CRM. I mean, obviously, people have helicopters just in general. This was early on in the apocalypse. This is not a reference to the CRM. The CRM did form in the early months or weeks or whatever of the apocalypse, but this helicopter isn't a reference to that. And the tank, I kind of like the reference. I mean, it references the army being involved with all of this, which makes sense, but it's kind of cool because in the first episode of The Walking Dead, we do see a tank there, right? Which Rick actually gets stuck in at the end, like sort of the cliffhanger to the episode. So yeah, sort of a nice nod there. Amazing visuals of crows and stuff, and I'm guessing this is Central Park, I'm not entirely sure. Crows have always just sort of had this symbolic meaning in The Walking Dead, so it's kind of nice to see. We see Times Square is in ruins. Subway tunnels destroyed, same with bridges. We see some survival and what it's like to sort of survive in the city as time goes on. We see an animated deer here, which is kind of funny because this probably looks a lot better than the CGI deer from the original show. We see people have built up walls with appliances and junk to keep walkers out. Zombies are everywhere in the streets with vegetation growing up on rooftops. This is sort of how people live now, and we're going to learn this throughout the series, so this is kind of a nice reference to that. We see the Statue of Liberty decaying. Amazing title card here, which is basically our introduction to Dead City. Welcome to Dead City. Now, this episode starts off with Maggie going to see Negan, and the reason why she wants to see him is because of the Croat, and we'll talk about that in a second, but She knows that he is staying at this motor inn, this sort of motel, and she goes to visit this bar where she fakes this story about a cabin she's staying at about an hour and a half away or something, and it's overrun. And she knows that some of the locals here are probably going to refer to her, a man by the name of Negan, who has helped this very motor inn get rid of walkers, and that actually does work. She learns that Negan has been staying at this motel. She goes to his room. She actually finds his clothes on his bed, along with some dolls on the other bed. And I originally thought that maybe this could be a reference to the fact that Negan's kid is actually still alive. And I thought so at first, but later on in the episode, we do see a shot of Ginny, who we'll discuss in a second, but she's actually playing with one of those dolls. So I believe that that was just Ginny's bed. Maggie then gets caught and brought to the bar, and then fighting ensues, which obviously alerts Negan to the scene, where he finds Maggie there and realizes, uh-oh, and decides to run. Maggie chases him down, and then after a fight, Maggie and Negan talk, where Negan learns that he's wanted and is first of all impressed by how good he looks. I love that. I love anything with Negan where you can sort of see his personality shine through, because he's honestly one of the best characters in the Walking Dead universe. Maggie explains that she got raided and that the person who did said that he would be back every single month to take more, which obviously sounds a lot like the Saviors, and they also took a hostage as collateral. Herschel. This is also something that the Saviors used to do, because if you remember, they took Eugene back in season 7. Maggie explains that he knows the man who took him. His name is the Croat, a former Savior, and also does the iconic whistle that Negan did in the season 6 finale. That was sort of a reference that she made, that was what she heard before, you know, she met Negan. And I mean, just going back to that night, the season 6 finale, it was honestly like, I'm so upset still with the cliffhanger. I think it ruined a really good moment, but just the build up to that scene, just the build up to that moment is still really amazing. And yeah, this episode does not shy away from that moment, which I'm super happy about. We see this amazing shot here of the woods and them just sort of driving down this road. And yeah, the reason why I have to point this out is because we got a lot of shots, obviously, throughout the years of characters in the woods, them driving the vehicles just sort of around, and The Walking Dead has just never looked this good, and who knew, right? That The Walking Dead could actually look this good with a bigger budget. They're traveling to this meetup spot of Maggie's where, you know, she can run into her people, and then they can take Ginny somewhere safe. That's the deal that Maggie and Negan made. On their way there, Maggie notices some walkers hanging, which is likely a reminder of what she did to Gregory in season 9. At least that's sort of how I took it. It seemed like she just remembered when she did that to Gregory, which was a pretty notable moment for Maggie in The Walking Dead. We do see a sign here too that says, "Welcome to New Babylon, the capital city of the New Babylon Federation." So there's this community now, it seems like, that is built and formed outside of New York and of the hilltop and stuff. And so it seems like there's law and order here as well. Lots has happened here. I do wonder how much the Commonwealth is involved in a lot of this, because this does seem to be pretty widespread. Now we see Maggie use a flare gun to obviously alert her group that she needs their help. And she explains to Negan here that they can't go to Hilltop because nobody's at Hilltop, basically. They had to relocate after Negan helped burn it down. Obviously a reference to season 10 when the Whisperers burned down the Hilltop and Negan joined them to do that, which is kind of funny because he was trying to get on Maggie's good side back then, and he did that. And ever since that, I don't think he's really tried to do that anymore. I think he's just tried to defend himself, which I think is a good thing. But yeah, it's the same people from the Hilltop. They're at this place here, so we learn here that the Hilltop is basically abandoned now, sadly. Ginny is a new character that Negan is looking after right now, and she doesn't talk because she found her father one night as a walker, and it was just so shocking to her that she just sort of refuses to speak, and that's really all we learn about her character in this episode. I have seen some footage from other episodes, and so she is in it. So I do imagine she's going to be a pretty big part of the season going forward, but as of now, that's sort of all we learn about this new character. Another new character goes by the name of Pearlie Armstrong, or I guess the Marshal of New Babylon, and he goes to visit this motor inn that Negan and Maggie were just at earlier in the episode. And we learned that Negan has killed a magistrate and 4 others. The Marshal references Negan's empire at the sanctuary and the death of Glenn. I found it weird that that story just sort of spreads around and it's just gotten everywhere, but I guess, you know, there was a lot of people that were there. Negan was sort of this menacing figure, you know, those people, the saviors that sort of left. I get it, how stories sort of go around and you just sort of tell people, and then especially if he's wanted, it makes sense that people are going to learn of that, because that was a crazy thing he did, right? So it makes sense, and it's kind of cool because it almost builds up this legend of like who he is, right? Which kind of makes him more cool. The Marshall actually references here tranquility, ordinance, if I'm saying that correctly, which means like law, order, justice, etc. We actually saw this on the sign earlier in the episode when Maggie drove by it. Ginny does go off with Maggie's people, and Maggie and Negan carry on to Manhattan. The Marshal afterwards finds this map book that Maggie dropped when she was chasing Negan, and he cleverly discovers that a page has been ripped out from Manhattan. And he decides to take a chance and see, well, maybe that's where she went, and that's where he goes. And then we get this really cool epic flashback scene of Glenn's death. And I say epic because I think that death scene was awesome. I know a lot of people got scared of that and are scared off from the show and they stopped watching after that. I don't know. I think that's ridiculous. Like, I think they honored the comics so amazingly there. Obviously that was a very haunting moment for Maggie, and it is still haunting her. Obviously she's still having nightmares about it, which makes a lot of sense. But Gimple and a lot of the writers back then were saying that this moment is a very defining moment in the series, and we're still seeing it to this day. However many years later, we are literally still seeing this to this day, that Glenn's death was such a defining moment in this universe that it is still affecting the story to this day, which is awesome. Negan actually tells the story of his father, saying that, you know, his father promised to bring him to see the Statue of Liberty, and something came up as usual with his father, and it just never happened. And it always bothered him. He's never seen the Statue of Liberty, and I think that's foreshadowing, I'm sure, that he's going to see it later on this season, which I think is probably going to be a very iconic shot. We actually see Negan holding this bracelet, and Maggie saw it earlier in the episode, but in this scene, Negan is holding it, and he's just holding it for now. And I was wondering, is that his wife's? Is that his child's? It's hard to tell. I mean, I know Annie in season 11 actually did have a lot of bracelets on, so this could be Annie's, who knows? Maybe this is a sign as to what happened to them. I mean, he did ignore the question earlier on, so something bad happened here, and just the way he's holding this bracelet, I mean, maybe this is his and I'm reading into this wrong, but that might be a bad sign. We do see Armstrong arrive at the location near Maggie and Negan, and before he does his sweep, he actually looks down at this notebook that he has, or this note that he has. It's not really a notebook, and there's someone by the name of Armstrong who I guess was living in New York City, so I'm wondering if this was a partner, a family member. So it looks like we're getting some character development here with this character, which I will say, you know, based off of first impressions with Marshall Armstrong, he's a really cool character. I don't like, he's not necessarily a hero. You know, he's sort of portrayed to be a hero because he's trying to catch the bad guy, which is Negan, but he does a lot of questionable things in this episode. So he's not necessarily the hero in this story. So I do wonder where this is going to go overall, but yeah, really cool moment. Maggie and Negan in this scene, however, do capture the junior marshal, I guess, that Negan references him as, and they head to New York City. Marshall Armstrong can't do anything about it. Negan actually wants to get rid of him on that boat, and Maggie doesn't, and this sort of starts this whole argument that was really building up all episode. And I love this scene because Negan just points out, how many husbands and fathers have you killed? And that's the thing about all of it, is you could look at Negan and just say, yeah, what he did to Glenn and Abraham was so horrific, but the thing is, our characters have killed a lot of people throughout this entire series, or not Dead City, but like the original series, right? Like, people have done a lot of horrible things, and yeah, what Negan did was technically really bad, but even if you just take what Rick and his people did just before that, they snuck into the sanctuary, they snuck into that outpost and took out a lot of people. It was so horrifying. Like, Glenn had a hard time doing it, right? So it's complex. This world is very complex, but it's such a fun, like, story moment that I just, that's why I like Maggie and Negan together. And I know some fans don't like that. They're sort of sick of the drama, but I just like the fact that that moment when you go back to season 6, when, you know, Glenn was having a hard time killing saviors at that outpost, and what eventually did happen to him, who Negan was, and just sort of the meaning and what you should do to be a good person, and you sort of take who Glenn was as a person. And it is hard because, to me, when I look at both characters, Maggie and Negan, I think they're both messed up, to be honest. Like, if you compare all three characters, Glenn, Maggie, and Negan, I think Maggie and Negan are very similar as characters and as people, and I think Glenn is almost the polar opposite, because Glenn really tried to, like, not do those really horrific things. He really, he really stood against it. He was a really good person, and that's the sad thing about this world, is when you're that good of a person, when you stand for things like that, that's usually what happens to you, right? Like, it's always sort of been a thing. If you're the moral compass of the show, you're likely going to die. But we do see the fog clear, and we see New York City, and it's a nighttime shot, but it's amazing. It looks absolutely haunting and terrifying. New York City at night is just, it's just terrifying. It looks so creepy. And we actually see walkers start to fall from the sky, or at least Negan says, like, what? Walkers are falling from the sky now? And yeah, I mean, they're literally falling off the rooftops and stuff, I guess. And it was such a cool scene because it's literally raining walkers. Like, it was such an awesome moment in this episode. Somebody actually drives by, and I never caught this on my original viewing of the episode, but someone actually drives by to lead walkers near Maggie and Negan. I don't know if it was intentionally towards them, but we actually do see that because there's music playing there. And this is not connected to the marshals or anything, because the marshals actually do find them afterwards. And then, yeah, we get that awesome encounter. A bunch of fighting and stuff happens in that store. And the woman that was watching Maggie and Negan from the rooftop actually blows out their match. And yeah, I guess sort of captures them in a sense. I do believe that she's probably a good character. I don't think she's actually a bad character, but yeah, cliffhanger, I guess. And then we get to the ending scene here with the Croat and Herschel. We actually see them both. The Croat, first of all, is crazy. We do actually see a burn on his ear, which to me says a lot about what happened to him. So I do think, you know, similar to what happened to Dwight, Negan probably used an iron or something like that on his ear. And yeah, that's how he got that. And yeah, an interesting connection there. Herschel to me is just an awesome character. I love the fact that, I don't know how old he is here, but he's much older to actually have some dialogue and play a role in the story here. So I think that's definitely really cool. And yeah, I thought this episode was just fantastic. The Croat, you know, he's a really creepy villain. He's really, he got a little bit too much enjoyment by cutting that zip line and seeing that guy fall from that. But yeah, to me though, I really thought that this was just honestly a phenomenal episode. I was blown away by it. I've watched it a couple times now, and I probably will watch it another time this week just because I like the cinematography. To me, this episode feels different. This feels like what I've always wanted The Walking Dead to be. Like, I've always wanted it to be sort of just this fresh, this brand new, and I just wanted this new excitement. I wanted it to feel really legit and like this unique story sort of thing, and we do have it. Like, The Walking Dead felt like this in the first 5 or 6 seasons, and it now feels like it again. So I'm really excited for episode 2. I really can't wait, but definitely post your thoughts down below. Hope you guys all enjoyed the video, and I'll see you guys in the next one.